In the 19th century, economists, politicians, and farmers had their eyes set on guano, or bird droppings. Dubbed white gold for its prized source as a fertilizer, the US began importing it in the 1840s. So-called guano mania followed. The US began importing so much guano that there were very real concerns about the foreign-owned oligopoly of the guano market. In 1864, for example, Spain and a Chilean-Peruvian alliance went to war over control of some guano caves. After another war in 1879 between Chile and Peru, Chile's victory grew their national treasury by 900%. Standing from the sidelines, the US government tried controlling prices, but ultimately settled on another solution, the Guano Islands Act of 1856. I promise I'm going to get to Fritz Haber, the topic of this video, but bear with me. This seemingly random tangent is very much related to his work. The Guano Islands Act authorizes US citizens to take possession of unclaimed islands containing guano for the US. I'm talking in the present tense here because the act has never been repealed. Under the act, the US gained control of 94 islands, including some familiar names such as Midway Atoll and Howland Island. For a time, the exploitation of these islands alleviated the guano mania. Guano is now owned and accessible by the United States, but the US population, and in fact the world's population, was growing so exponentially fast that there were valid fears that a lack of fertilizer would inhibit agricultural production and therefore fail to meet the steadily growing world population. This is the context that the world saw as it stepped into the 20th century. Traditional agricultural methods, reliant on the naturally occurring nitrates in guano, struggled to keep pace with the global population. These Malthusian anxieties gripped the scientific community with fears of widespread famine on the horizon. Dr. Fritz Haber, a Prussian-born Jewish scientist, emerged as an unlikely hero. Haber had figured out how to bypass the need for guano and instead synthesize fertilizer from hydrogen gas and atmospheric nitrogen. And with nitrogen making up 78% of the atmosphere, the white gold lost its shine. A new agricultural revolution had arrived, and Dr. Haber was its architect. Fritz Haber was born in Breslau in the Kingdom of Prussia. As he grew up, he was influenced to study chemistry by his father's work as a successful importer of natural dyes and pigments. He jumped around various universities, doing a year of military service, and then ultimately trudged through several years of odd research jobs and unemployment. By 1894, though, Haber was appointed as an assistant in the Department of Chemical and Fuel Technology at a university in Karlsruhe. It was here that Haber climbed the academic ranks and invented the catalytic formation of ammonia, a critical component of fertilizer, from hydrogen and atmospheric nitrogen under high temperature and pressure. To scale up his invention, he partnered with Carl Bosch, an industry man from a chemical company. Together, they made large-scale ammonia synthesis possible in what we now know as the Haber-Bosch process. The impact was profound. Today, the food base of half the world population is reliant on the Haber-Bosch process. The reliance on naturally available guano plummeted, and the world turned toward cheaper, more readily available ammonia synthesis as the solution for agricultural expansion. For his efforts, Dr. Haber was awarded the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 1918. A few years before that award, however, Dr. Haber had patriotically supported the German cause in World War I. Using his electrochemical knowledge, he spearheaded the development and deployment of chlorine gas on the Western Front, becoming the pioneer in chemical warfare. Here, I want to provide a tangent that I think is important. Dr. Haber was married to another successful scientist named Clara Immerwahr. After their marriage, Immerwahr increasingly took a backseat professionally due to Haber's success. She expressed frustration that she was not able to research and conduct science herself. After the outbreak of World War I, she also became increasingly agitated by Haber's involvement in the development of chemical weapons. She allegedly spoke out against her husband's research as a perversion of the ideals of science and a sign of barbarity corrupting the very discipline which ought to bring new insights into life. The day after Haber returned from the front, she shot herself in the chest and died. Her suicide was not well documented, and there's an ongoing debate about her reasons for doing so, one of which is that she was deeply unhappy with Haber's chemical weapons work. Her death was only a short time after the Second Battle of Ypres, where Haber himself oversaw the first successful deployment of chlorine gas. There were 67,000 casualties in the battle. The day after Immerwahr's death, Haber left for the Eastern Front for the first gas attack against the Russians. In the recent book, How to Hide an Empire, the author talks about Haber and Immerwahr in the context of American colonization of the Guano Islands. The author, Daniel Immerwahr, is a descendant of Clara. Haber defended gas warfare against accusations that it was inhumane, saying that death was death. The disapproval that the knight had for the man with the firearm is repeated in the soldier who shoots with steel bullets towards the man who confronts him with chemical weapons. The gas weapons are not at all more cruel than the flying iron pieces. On the contrary, the fraction of fatal gas diseases is comparatively small. The mutilations are missing. These words would have the cruelest irony 20 years later, when his research was used in the development of Zyklon B, a German pesticide. Zyklon B, which contained cyanide, was used to kill 1.1 million Jews during the Holocaust. So what happened to Dr. Haber in his later years of life? Well, following Germany's defeat in World War I, Haber was enraged over the war reparations and was humiliated by Germany's defeat. He dedicated himself to repaying the debt. He became fixated on extracting wealth from the ocean, convinced that he could turn the trace amounts of gold dissolved in the water. For 5 years, he pursued this goal, but his efforts proved futile. The elusive gold remained unattainable, leaving him with a bitter sense of failure. Life soon became worse. Hitler became chancellor in 1933 and soon after announced that Jews could not serve in civil service. As a veteran of World War I, Haber was exempt, but his employees, most of which were Jewish, were not. Making a stand, he resigned. Haber soon after left Germany and took a professorship at Cambridge. He was nonetheless seen as a pariah due to his role in the chemical weapons usage in the war. During a trip to Switzerland, his ailing health worsened. In 1934, he died alone in a hotel. Taking a step back, it's hard to grapple with the cruel duality of Haber's work. It's unclear how we should look at him, except to acknowledge that duality. A Jewish-born scientist who pioneered an agricultural revolution that sustains 4 billion people also was the father of chemical warfare, and his work contributed to the brutal deaths of 1.1 million Jews, some of which were his direct descendants. While researching this video, someone writing about Haber highlighted a quote by Alexander Solzhenitsyn, a Russian dissident. In my opinion, this quote succinctly summarizes the complicated dichotomy of who Haber was as a person. If only it were all so simple. If only there were evil people somewhere insidiously committing evil deeds, and it were necessary only to separate them from the rest of us and destroy them. But the line dividing good and evil cuts through the heart of every human being. And who is willing to destroy a piece of his own heart? During the life of any heart, this line keeps changing. Sometimes it is squeezed one way by an exuberant evil, and sometimes it shifts to allow enough space for good to flourish. One and the same human being is, at various ages, under various circumstances, a totally different human being. At times, he is close to being a devil, and at times to sainthood. But his name doesn't change, and to that name we ascribe the whole lot, good and evil. If you like this video, please consider liking and subscribing. It helps me know what interests my audience and helps me grow my channel. I know this video was a little bit heavier than my usual content, but I thought it would still be interesting. You can also check out my Patreon. The link is in the bio.